Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Let's Write an Adventure, our ongoing live stream where we are creating a full campaign in real time. I'm RJ Kerr, your host, and if this is your first time joining us, we are, like I said, creating a full custom campaign in real time so that you can see all of the thought process that goes into it, all the techniques that I use, all the warts and everything, as they say. We have are including a domain of dread, a custom domain of dread in this as well. So we're creating that from scratch. And we've already done a lot of work on this. We have so far created how our characters are going to get into this domain of dread through a portal that opens up during the blood moon and talked about what motivations might draw them in. We have figured out where they're going to land, a shanty town called Darkport that is ruled by warring factions and set on the edge of an inland sea. And in fact, this whole domain of dread takes place in and around this inland sea that was once the basin of a thriving civilization, now flooded and left in ruins, and home to an elemental evil that we are calling Ovander, and still in the process of fleshing out Ovander. We have created the very first adventure that the characters engage in, where they are kidnapped and briefly enslaved and have to escape their captors, and in doing so, discover the existence of an artifact lost somewhere in this domain of dread that gives the wielder power over the domain, and therefore becomes their best chance for escape. And so now we are working on the portion of the adventure where the characters get proactive. They've escaped captivity. They've had a moment to kind of recollect themselves, and now they're picking up clues and they're following them to find this artifact. And this is taking us all over the domain of dread, so we can do a fair amount of world building with it. And effectively, what we're using is a node structure sort of style where the characters get a clue and they can follow that to what we're calling an investigative scene or a little mini portion of the adventure where they can engage in any manner of situation. It could be a social encounter, it can be a full-fledged little mini dungeon, it can be a raid style adventure or a heist like we're working on right now. But whatever it is, it also gives them the opportunity to find more clues that lead to other investigative scenes, and it really gives the players a lot of agency and lets them kind of go wherever they feel like they need to go in this world to get the information that they need, while still giving us the structure that we need to kind of move the story forward and also not show up to the table completely unprepared. So, we are working on building out some of those little investigative scenes. We've already built one of them out in their entirety. We've started fleshing some out with clues, and now we're working on one that we're calling our Ghost Ship Castle Caper, at least for the time being, because this is a heist style adventure where we have this idea for a multitude of shipwrecks that have been gathered around a natural stone arch off a seaside cliff, and the ships have then been kind of repurposed into this castle-like structure that's become a Sahuagin stronghold, and that the characters are here with the mission of seeking out this ship's log that they know has a clue as to the artifact's last known location in it. And so we are working on building that out as we go. So let me go ahead and share my screen here so you can kind of see what we're working on. And so we've already done a bunch of steps for this. In fact, we are leveraging a modified version of the 5-room dungeon for this. Knowing that it's a high style structure, we're kind of shifting our thought process to what I'd call a 5-scene dungeon, where we have an entry, and so that's going to be part of our heist planning, where our characters are going to be rewarded for doing some preliminary reconnaissance, checking out the place they're supposed to charge into, learning the guard patrols, the exterior layout, what entrances there are, all that kind of cool stuff. Then we have our setback, and so we've determined what happens if the players get caught or the characters get caught. What how does the alarm get raised? What constitutes raising the alarm? How many times do they have to fail a stealth check before they activate that alarm? That kind of stuff. We've built all of that out. Now we're working on what we would classically call the puzzle in a 5-room dungeon, but really is probably better characterized as the challenge. And this is the simple act of finding what they're looking for. They don't know the interior layout exactly. They don't know exactly where this item is they're looking for is, and so they've got to search around and find it while not getting caught, theoretically. And so we're building out a bunch of descriptions for the various rooms within this stronghold to give it a little bit of flavor, to give ourselves as DMs some toys to play with as we do this. We have already built out the encounters that the characters will could have, and we've separated them into what we call action groups to make them a little more dynamic, meaning that they start keyed to a particular area, but that they're likely to move about the stronghold because that's just a lot more fun if you're sneaking around, that somebody might come down the corridor you're moving through rather than you just have to beat the passive persuasion, a passive perception of the people who are in the rooms adjoining that corridor. It just adds a little more, makes it a little more dynamic, makes it a little more engaging, and adds some of that pleasurable kind of storytelling tension to the adventure. Um, and so we've built out a whole bunch of those. And so we don't really need to worry about encounters for these key locations. We're kind of worried about descriptions and maybe additional hazards, and we'll talk about treasure and all that kind of stuff in there as well. We've also given some thought to our, although we haven't built it out yet, to what we would call our climax in the 5 scene dungeon kind of model. This replaces our BBEG, our big bad evil guy encounter, because the players in a high style adventure are rewarded for avoiding big confrontations. They're rewarded for getting in and getting out without being seen, but we still want to add a large challenge at the end, something for them to overcome towards the climax of the adventure. And in this case, we came up with the idea that maybe a group of dignitaries allied with the Sahuagin show up at the climax of the adventure, changing kind of the layout and the normal day-to-day practice of the stronghold, meaning that getting out is different than it was getting in, and forcing the characters to think on their feet as they try not to get caught. And the reward is very simple. It's the ship's log and investigating the information that comes with that, and the clue that it will provide, or clues up potentially, that it will provide towards the location of this artifact. So, with that brief summary underway here, or complete here, we're going to go ahead and dig back into building out some of these key locations. Um, we worked on these last time, and you guys came up with some really incredible ideas. So please feel free to jump in the chat, even if you're watching the recording of this, to toss in some thoughts if you have them. Your thoughts, opinions, feelings, your questions, any of that kind of stuff. I love to see that stuff in the chat. This is an interactive kind of live stream, so love to see what you're thinking. But last time we left off with the temple, and this is a temple for the Sahuagin, which are a shark worshipping people. Um, and you all came up with the idea that it should be a living temple in many ways, with a giant sea anemone as the altar floating in the center of this inverted hall structure, tethered in place by braided kelp rope. Um, and having the room illuminated with these gelatinous glows of bioluminescent algae woven into the curtains of kelp that line the room. And so, giving it a very living, dynamic sort of feel and making it kind of a temple in the round, as opposed to just having the altar on one end. It's in the center of the space here, which gives it a new feel and takes advantage of the fact that it's flooded. And so we have three-dimensional movement in there very easily, which I think is really, really cool. So we're going to take some of that creativity and we are going to apply it to some other rooms as well. Um, we can hit our treasure room and kind of round out the last, the bottom half uh, of our rooms here. So why don't we go ahead and do that? The treasure room was what again? It was room 11, and we have a chart here telling us which places are flooded and which ones aren't. The treasure room is not flooded, so uh, then we can kind of think about how that might be guarded and what sort of challenges, or what sort of, we already kind of have the encounter that goes along with that. We've got a security detail with 4 Sahuagin and 1 Boulette pup. But we can think about the kind of things that would be in there. We can think about where it would be in the structure. Would it be a strong box kind of room made of stout wooden beams? Would it involve the stone arch and have maybe a rock backing to it? That kind of stuff. Um, we've got Jonathan Frost in the chat already, who's asking, what would Sahuagin value? And that's a great question to toss out when we're thinking about populating a treasure room. Pearls come to mind immediately, personally. Think about pearls and I think about coral jewelry. Um, Shark's teeth would probably have some religious value to them. So we could have some artistic sort of elements that have to do with that. Um, the I think this is a good place to put in some treasure, like some legitimate kind of like from the character's standpoint, some treasure. So some gold, um, that kind of stuff. Maybe some magic items we could pop in here. Magic item or two that we could toss in. Might give them something that would be useful in exploring this place. Um, let's see here. Let's start with our description. And we've also got, let's see here, Jonathan Frost says, it makes sense that it might be partially carved into the stone arch. That's true. It could be. I think that, like, it makes sense, I think, at least for the back to be. The only hesitation I have on bringing the stone into it again is that we have used that for things like the shark pens, um, and you know we're likely going to use that for some other spaces in here. But I guess we haven't used it as much as I think we have. I feel like it's been used, but we've got the the Boulette stables as well. But I guess that's really just kind of two places, and we could do kind of a halvesy where like the back space is carved into the stone, and the front is kind of made out of stout beams salvaged from the ships, and with a iron bound locking door or something along those lines. Um, so let's start with that, and then let's give it some additional flavor beyond. So let's say the this locked room is secured behind an iron bound oak door. Let's see here. The walls of the front half are made of stout beams salvaged from a ship's hull, while the back half is carved into the stone arch. Let's see, carved into the rock of the stone arch. Let's see here. An alcove by the front door houses the sentries which guard the room night and day. Great. So what else could we do to make this kind of, to give it some more than just kind of being a hollow space where we store treasure? You think it needs a trap? Do you think it needs some other kind of um, some other kind of seaside sort of setting here, nautical sort of feel to it. I feel like with the ship's beams and the rock, I kind of get that sea cave ship feel to it, but I think it needs something more than just the addition of treasure. Um, Although it certainly needs treasure. And we'll come back on what could be in that when we populate this. Um, hmm. Um, maybe. Um, hmm. Maybe it doesn't. I mean, it's got guards on it. It's locked. Maybe the door just needs a trap. Maybe we just need a trap on it. Especially, double up on this. Giving the characters a good reason to sneak in here, and we can put some nice treasure in there, stuff that might be useful to them. Maybe stuff that gives them the ability to breathe underwater for a limited amount of time, and making the exploration of certain other parts, um, uh, you know, of the stronghold easier. Um, let's see here. Ooh, blowfish poison. I like that. We could do a classic needle trap, but the needle is one of the spines of a sea urchin, and it's been laced with blowfish poison. It's a paralytic. Um, yeah, that's kind of got a cool nautical vibe to it. That's the sort of thing that we're missing here. All right. The door is protected by a needle trap. Where the needle is the spine of a sea urchin and has been coated, or should say, and is coated with blowfish poison, a paralytic. And we'll figure out exactly what the details are on that poison later. But let's add that up to our hazards here. Let's say blowfish poison. I like it. I like it a lot. Yeah. We might even do something with those sea urchin spines. They kind of break off, so it sticks into the person who triggers it, and it breaks off in their skin, and now they're maybe giving them disadvantage on the check until the spine is removed or something along those lines. Um, Something that we could play around with when we get kind of into the details uh, of our hazards here, and kind of coming up with the various traps, which we'll probably do all at once. Okay, sweet. All right, that gives us the treasure room. I think we'll come back and we'll put treasure in it later. If you've been watching this channel for any amount of time, you know that I like to do treasure as one of the last things. Just because I think it helps me from overpopulating the treasure. You want to, I mean, you want to overpopulate a little bit because the characters aren't going to find everything, especially in an adventure like this where they're not encouraged to explore too much. Um, but at the same time, I have a tendency to just be like, we'll put treasure in every room then if I don't have a cohesive plan. Uh, so I tend to wait and put it in at the end. Let's see here. What should strike us next? The barracks room stands out at me, and I think the barracks room is flooded. Yes, that makes sense. All right, and so we kind of having we got an encounter in the barracks room, which is off-duty warriors. We have five Sahuagin warriors and one reef shark pet that can be found there at all hours. Um, and so to kind of represent the rotation of the various warriors. Um, so the barracks should probably be kind of a multifunctional space. Um, in that they would, I think, have both would serve as both kind of the mess hall and would serve as mess hall, common room, and then of course sleeping quarters for our Sahuagin warriors. Um, and let's take a lesson from our temple and let's think outside the box on this one, um, because we would have you know it's flooded. We could have creatures moving in three dimensions. We have this shark in here that's their pet that's kind of swimming around. Um, we um, yeah, so we can have some floating in here. I wonder how Sahuagins sleep. I think about the various sea life out there and how some of these creatures sleep, and some things will nestle down into rocks in the reef. Like sea turtles, for example, will kind of hook themselves. They'll use a fin and kind of hook themselves into the reef to kind of keep from floating away. When they do that, sea otters will float on the surface and sleep on their backs and wrap themselves in kelp to keep themselves tethered. Some fish just keep swimming constantly and kind of rest part of their brain as they go. Sharks, for example, constantly, many of them keep swimming constantly. I don't think Sahuagin have to be on the move constantly. I don't, just doesn't seem like it fits for a sentient species like this. Um, so maybe they're more like parrotfish in this regard. And the parrotfish will kind of nestle down into the reef and uh, well, cover themselves in slime and to kind of deter predators and then go to sleep. Um, the So maybe we've got some more like alcoves that have been built into this, as opposed to little places, little shelves that these warriors can kind of tuck themselves into to keep from floating off while they sleep. Um, and then maybe these kind of radiate outward from this common room in the middle, where they kind of take their meals and spend their waking hours when they're off duty. Um, I think of a typical sort of your castle kind of common room, and you think of there's a hearth and a table in the center, and I don't think that we would have that here necessarily. In fact, I kind of wonder how would Sahuagin eat at a table, or would they have another kind of floating sort of structure that they eat at, or would they kind of just float on their own and sort of use their own bodies, or lean on their back and kind of use their bellies like sea otters, or would they kind of tear into their food more like sharks? Kind of feel like kind of like sharks. They kind of have maybe a uh, you know, big roast of something, a big hunk of fish or something like that, and they kind of tear off chunks and kind of eat that all kind of suspended in the center of the room, and kind of a little mini feeding frenzy. Um, and Yeah, let's see. Jonathan Ross says floating wooden cages for the food. Yeah, I could see that. I could absolutely see that. As instead of a refrigerator or a cupboard or something like that, they've got you know, fish in live cages, live fish in cages that they can just kind of pull from and feed themselves with, or snack on. when they don't have food coming in, made meals coming in from the kitchen or something along those lines. I can kind of see that. Um, Cage too to keep the shark out of it. Okay, cool. So um, let's say this flooded set of rooms centers on a shared common room. With what if they have yeah, what if they have kind of on the walls like coral, kind of like coral ledges that kind of stick out a little bit, and so you can store things there as well. Let's see, with coral ledges sticking out from the wooden walls. Let's see here, with coral ledges sticking out from the wooden walls. Dormitories radiate outward from this central room. Each houses a set of bunk-like alcoves where the warriors float to sleep. The common room houses several floating cages of live fish that serve as snacks for the off-duty warriors. Okay. There definitely needs to be some treasure in this room too, I think. We'll figure out what that's going to be later. But just, I can imagine in terms of one, you get the personal effects from these warriors, but two, this is kind of their space, and so they probably have art objects taken from other conquests and that sort of thing from campaigns of the past, and their own victories, that kind of deal. Standards from other defeated foes. Looted artworks and sculptures and that kind of deal. They probably have those collected here as well for the as part of a company collection. Um, and so so we should definitely have some treasure in there. Cool. All right. Well, that brings us pretty much to the 30-minute mark that we try to keep to on our Wednesdays. So I think we're going to go ahead and wrap up here. Uh, Thank you so much for watching. If you've enjoyed this, please like, subscribe, leave a comment. All that stuff helps the channel grow. It helps more people find me. Um, I am also not just a guy who writes adventures on the internet. I also run professional D&D games, and you can come check those out and see what I'm all about at startplaying.games/GM/RJ come jump into one of my campaigns or one of my one-shots and play a game with me. I'd love to get to meet all of you at the table as well as here on YouTube. We will pick up this series at our usual time on Monday, and so that'll be 6 p.m. Central Time if you're in that part of the country, part of the U.S. And that one, those Mondays go for about an hour, as you know. Next week we'll have live streams on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So we'll have a bonus one next week as well. All right. Thank you again, and I look forward to seeing you all on Monday. I'll talk to you then. Bye now.